I'm going to share with you a story of one of the most cruel things I have ever done to a man. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I would like to illustrate the importance of a woman taking responsibility for her experience of men. So there was this guy, we'll call him Joe. I met him at an event and I instantaneously felt a very strong attraction to him. And I could feel that there was something there for him as well. However, it didn't feel romantic or anything like that right off the bat. It was more friend circles, and we both really connected on certain creative endeavors that we were up to in our lives. And so we spent time together, usually in groups of people, over the next several months. And I really, really had a liking for this guy. And I watched him go after other women, but he would come to me for deep conversation, meaningful conversation, and I would just eat it up. But inside, I was just watching him go after all of these other women and wondering why not me? Okay. So something else to understand about this man is that he smoked and cigarettes, and he drank. And there was a moment where I realized that he was making these choices for himself, and I felt for him because, I wanted him to be healthy and well and vibrant and alive. Meanwhile, guess who was smoking cigarettes and drinking? But I couldn't see that at the time, right? So I wrote poems about this man. I just had created this whole world in my head about him and how much I cared for him and loved him and wanted to love him, and why wasn't it reciprocated? And he cared for me. That was clear, but I also couldn't fully receive it because I was still just in this world of well, why isn't he choosing me, right? And at some point, the waking up to the dynamic that was happening it only began when I realized, because a friend pointed out to me, that I was so concerned about his suffering and, his cigarette use and his drinking, and wasn't actually focused on mine. I was focused on his suffering and his vices, right? But I wasn't looking actually at my own. And so when this friend brought this to my attention, I couldn't unsee it. I was whoa. She said, his suffering is not your problem. And it was one of the first times that I really began to turn the mirror back on myself. But I still couldn't fully see at this point, okay? And so I was still living in this world where he was in some way being intentionally hurtful toward me. No, I was just interpreting his actions through this lens of hurt. He's hurting me because we're friends and he, enjoys being with me and cherishes me to some degree, but is going after other women. So I remember we had this one, the probably the most intimate that we ever got was this one night, and it wasn't not physical or sexual intimacy, but just kind of feeling the sense of our hearts beginning to connect, and him sharing things with me, and I could feel in our bodies, something felt different, and it was it never crossed that threshold. And I look back and I suspect, and I think he even said this to me at some point years later, that he knew that if we got together, that it wasn't going to be a good thing. It wasn't going to be a healthy thing for us. And so for him, he was protecting me. On some level, he was protecting me from himself, which is actually very respectable, right? But to me, I just saw him chasing other women and not picking me, okay? And so that just fed this victim narrative in me that was, ate it up and got to dwell inside of my own suffering about this man, and I got to dwell inside of my own drama about this man, right? So upon realizing that I had to now begin the process of getting my life right, that I knew this was a man who was a line in the sand moment. I was like, I don't want to have this kind of attachment to a man in the way that I have, the focusing all on him and what he's doing or not doing, instead of focusing on myself. So I woke up this morning shortly after the friend of mine pointed out that I was overly concerned with him and not actually looking at myself. I woke up one morning and my hair had been really long. I chopped my hair off. I stopped smoking cigarettes, weed. I stopped drinking alcohol. I even stopped drinking coffee. And it wasn't something where I was like, oh, I'm done doing this for XYZ amount of time. No, I just made the decision and then I followed it for 4 years. For 4 years. Because I knew that I had to begin to get right with how I was relating to men. That all these cycles of painful experiences with men, well, guess who's the common denominator? Me. And so the cruel moment came when I still couldn't fully see at the time. I was in my late 20s. I still couldn't fully see what the dynamic that was going on. I wasn't in full responsibility, nowhere near it, to be honest with you. And I sent this man a piece of mail, an actual written piece of mail that said, thank you and fuck you. I'm just going to tell y'all real talk. It was a postcard too, so that other people would see it, that his roommate would see it, so that he would feel the sting that I felt, because I was living in this world of jealousy, anger toward him for, in his sovereignty, pursuing other women. I was sitting here wondering if I should share this, because it's just so, it's not a pleasant story to share, but I'm sharing it because I could not see how I had become the victim in the story of my life. So much so that I would interpret this whole relationship through the lens of, why doesn't he want me? And it's not fair. Why is he choosing her? And what about me? Such that I did something hurtful. I said something horribly hurtful to that man. And I apologized years later. It took me years to really see that I had created this whole experience for myself and really convince myself that he was the one who was hurting me. Now, look, it's like, even if he intentionally went after other women to like make me jealous, which there's no way. Like, that was not the case, right? But even if he did, I'm still responsible for myself and my experience and my choices and how I see the people in my life. I'm responsible for my relationships. I'm responsible for communicating something that feels hard or hurtful to me. I couldn't see that at the time. I am responsible for saying, hey, I'm noticing this story that I'm telling myself about you and me, and I would just like to share it and see what you think about that. I feel really sad because the vulnerability of being honest about how one feels, right? I feel sad. I feel really vulnerable saying this. But I feel really sad because I really like you and I see you going, pursuing these other women, and I really enjoy our closeness, and I just feel confused about that. So look, I didn't have these words then. I had not been practiced at sharing the honest truth, at sharing my heart, even my desire, even like that I felt this attraction to this man. I just held it all in and then created this whole movie in my mind where he was the villain, he was hurting me, and I was the victim. I have spent years now, years of my life getting in right relationship to men and to my experience of men. Because again, seeing all the ways that I had outbursts toward men and had assumptions about their intentions and their behaviors that just created worlds in my head over and over and over again, villainizing them. And then at some point realize I'm the common denominator here. Like, there's something here for me to look at for myself and how I see and experience men and how I am showing up as a woman. This has been the most important journey of my life. This has been the most important journey of my life. Repairing relationship with men, repairing my own sight of men, and being willing to be in honesty with myself about my own feelings, my own fears, my own worries, my own excitements and desires, like actually being in relationship to those, like to this inner terrain. What's happening here, right? What's actually happening? What do I actually feel? Letting myself feel that. Like, instead of being victimized by life, making a man responsible for how I feel. we have an impact on one another. That is part of the relational game, right? And I am sharing this to stress the importance for women of being in touch with and responsible for our experience and being willing to communicate about it, being willing to say the thing that is so vulnerable, to say the things that are so vulnerable that we would rather craft a whole world where I got to be a victim and blame him for how I felt, rather than own the pain, the hurt that I felt really liking this guy and watching him go after other women, rather than just really being honest about that. I cast him as a villain. And like, there's this culture, I see this happen amongst women, amongst so many women. There's no power in being a victim. There's no responsibility. There's no agency really to create the life that you like, that a life that sings, to create a life that feels good for you, for us. Like, I see how I stood in the way of the beauty that was available to me with men. The wondrous relationships that I could have had. This is hard. I have had to work through so much embarrassment and shame and guilt and so much remorse for my past behaviors and the stories that I had created in my mind about how men treated me or wronged me. And like, here's the thing too, is there like there are men who can do really horrible things and harmful things, abusive things. But if I'm a woman who lives with this lens that men are villains, that men are abusive, that men are horrible, that men are like cruel, that is what I then have perception filters to see. Men are amazing and are wonderful. Most men, the vast majority of men are good men. They're doing what they do for whatever their work or vocation is. They're taking care of their families, or they're setting themselves up to be able to have a family. They're seeking to cherish the ones that they love, seeking for a woman that they might cherish. They are pursuing their dreams. They are pursuing their fitness, right? And if men aren't doing that, okay, that's his choice. But so many men, that is what they are living. And then women who collectively have this view of men, righteously based in past hurts and abuses, right? But to have that view of men, I can't experience the good of them. I really invite women to grapple with what the stories are from past hurts around men. What are the stories that are there? What are the narratives that are there? And to really begin to see the difference between the narratives and like the actual reality of men, of a man, and how he shows up and what he does and what he says and who he is and how he behaves, and also not expecting or demanding them to be perfect, because none of us are. Look at me. I'm living in this realm where like I needed this man to show up perfectly for me. I needed him to show up in some kind of way for me. I was far from perfect in those moments. The healing of my heart and my feminine like nature, the healing of myself as a woman has come through this reckoning. Repairing relationship with my own father, forgiving what the things that I perceived as less than what I deserved. Finding deep forgiveness and love and care and honoring for my father and for God the Father, for Cosmic Father. Repairing my relationship as daughter who honors Father, who honors men, who treats men with dignity and respect as a baseline. As a baseline. That is operating system level. I respect men and I grant men dignity. And in doing so, I get to be a dignified woman who practices being in reality about the relationships in my life, being in reality about what I feel, being in reality about what I say, so that people understand what's going on inside of me. It is so vulnerable, y'all. This journey is so vulnerable. It can feel excruciatingly vulnerable, okay? Like, so excruciating. But what is the alternative? The alternative for me would have been continuing to live in this life and in this path where I am a victim of men. And I just keep recreating those cycles. I am here to have such a beautiful, healthy, erotic, vital relationship and marriage with a man where we like make an awesome team and we have a beautiful lovership and we are both in service to something greater than ourselves in this world. That pathway would have not been available to me Had I stayed in this realm of feeling victimized, amen. I am so glad that I chose this healing and this repair. And my prayer is for more women to see this, to see these kinds of patterns at play, to be willing to consider that there's another way, there's a better way, there's a bigger perspective. And the last thing I'll say is, like, I had to create so much space to feel the unfelt pain, the pain that I had stuffed down from childhood, from early experiences with boys and men, and like the ways that I had silenced myself and felt like I had to keep everything just here and inside. I've had to be willing to feel all of the feelings. And I invite women, I invite you, if this resonates for you, to create such an exquisite nest in yourself for your own feelings, for your own experiences. And if you are willing, if this is something that you feel open to, bringing it all to God. If God doesn't resonate, bringing it to Mother Nature, bringing it to the cosmic all that is, whatever that is for you. For me, God is it's personal relationship with the great creator. To be willing to bear it all, bring all the pain, all the anguish, all the upset, all the bitterness, the resentment, the love, just bringing it all to the prayer mat, to the altar, and being willing to be with it, to create space for it, to breathe and to be, so that it is not unconsciously running the show of my life. I'm sharing all of this because I love women. I love men. I love us, and I want the best for us. I do, with all my heart. So, I hope that this has created some kind of value for you. I hope that you feel my heart. And yeah, if there's anything that you'd like to share, please feel free to do so. And as always, I am sending you so much love. Take care of you. May you cherish yourself exquisitely and feel what is alive in your own heart. Blessings.